call, please.
Thank you.
Never too soon.
Alderman Sorrentino?
Here.
Alderman Messina?
Here.
Alderman Catalano?
Here.
Alderman Jacob?
Here.
Alderman Woods? Alderman Roy Wesley?
We're both here.
I declare,
Alderman Eugene Wesley?
Here.
Alderman Sismarski?
I declare a quorum. Next, I want to make a motion for, to approve the minutes for planning and zoning and building, regular meeting of July 23rd, 2015. That is my motion.
So move.
Any corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we're going to move some of the agenda around as the residents are here for the variations, so we're going to take care of those first. First, I want to make a motion for the lot coverage variation for 268 Carrot Drive, the case number 15V4. That is my motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions? Alderman Eugene Wesley?
Is that the one with the driveway and deck? Nope.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay,
Our neighbor's deck.
okay.
This is,
And they moving, I'm trying to look for it here. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to clarify, this is, there's 268 and then there's 298 on the agenda. 268, which is the first one, is the expansion of the deck.
And
Go ahead.
and in the lot coverage, he's not taking over that much lot coverage. There's only like 5 feet or
Go
something.
ahead, Mr. Cage.
Yes, at the CDC meeting, the CDC felt very strongly about not exceeding. Obviously, the lot coverage is 35% maximum, not exceeding a variation of an extra 7%. That's why in a number of these reports, you'll see a not to exceed 42%.
Okay.
That's it? Mayor?
Ed, just so I'm clear, it's going to be a wood deck, and basically underneath is gravel, and the water's just going to seep through as if it was no deck there, correct?
Correct. The CDC felt very strongly, they do feel very strongly in terms of decks versus concrete patios, and that issue came up with also the next case as well.
Alderman Woods?
Yeah, and when I looked at it, do we know what the number is if what the coverage is if I excluded the existing deck and the new deck? If I didn't count those, because in most communities, they don't count the deck, as long as they meet a couple criteria building it, would we be closer to the 35%?
Mr. Cage?
In looking through specifically this subdivision, because we've had a couple of requests in this subdivision, it seems like the majority of the homes are built to the maximum 35%. So I think once you exclude the deck, you're looking at around 35%. And I think that is the problem in a nutshell, certainly in this subdivision. I think someone was probably informed that the maximum was 35%, and someone took that as a literal build everything to 35%.
Them builders.
No comment.
So theoretically, I guess the point I'm getting to, if we address instead of changing the coverage, which while it might be an issue now, if we change or tweak some of the things that we count or create some allowances, that might be an easier path than arbitrarily changing 35 to 42, because theoretically, I think that most of these ones that were up here, if we weren't counting the decks, would be a lot closer. And like I say, in most communities, they're not counted as long as they're not skirted and they don't put plastic underneath them. And
Go ahead.
I think that's an excellent point. The issue did arise at the CDC meetings, which was other communities, and you referenced them very well, Alderman Woods, other communities don't count decks. There's a number of different ways to look at lot coverage. In looking at our comparable, neighboring communities, we are probably the most restrictive in terms of lot coverage, and rightly so with concerns with flooding, but we're the most restrictive in regards to some of our neighboring communities.
All right, thank you.
Alderman Jacob.
Just a question for Mr. Cage. I heard a lot of communities don't consider the driveway as well. Is that true, or?
Well, there's a number of different ways of looking at lot coverage. Some communities look at two things. They look at lot coverage, which is a typical structure, house, garage, and then they look at impervious coverage. So, for example, the one I'm familiar with is Park Ridge and Itasca, and they're fairly similar. For example, 35% in Park Ridge is the coverage allowed for the house, garage, and shed, any kind of structure above the ground. And then there's an impervious percentage which goes higher than the 35%. In Park Ridge, it happens to be 60, which is a little excessive, in my opinion. If you look at Itasca, they have the 35% for the house, garage, shed, basically any above-ground structure, and then all the flat work, whether it's a patio, etc., then theirs is 50%.
Alderman Messina.
I know we talked a while back about this. My goal is to have you draft some type of report, maybe if we can see around surrounding communities where we stand. So as a group, we can talk about what makes sense, whether it's existing structures or changing the way you look at it or we look at it. Is that something you could prepare for us?
Absolutely. I think there's probably a number of different ways we can look at it, whether it's Alderman Woods had a great example of not including decks, because obviously they do allow water through them. There's other options, permeable pavers. There's a number of different ways to achieve a similar goal, and I think really what we could certainly do, put together a report, list a number of different options, show you guys what other communities do, and then see how you feel, whether it's going in one direction or the other. Another option is maybe putting a maximum size on a driveway. The other option is to exclude that. So Alderman Jacob had that idea as well.
Go ahead.
So. How many variations did you actually come across your desk? Was it 4? Or?
Well, tonight we're looking at 3. I mean, really, there's a number of newer subdivisions where this is prevalent, and there's some older areas of towns as well. And really, what typically an ordinance will have, R1, R2, R3 zoning districts. And what that means is, R1 will say will be 10,000 square feet. R2 is, 8,000, R3 is 6,500. And there's usually a sliding scale with the percentages. What's different in our code is it's 35% right across the board, which 35% of 10,000 square feet, is one thing, 3,500. 35% of another lot, which is 6,000, you can work out the math. That's a big difference. So.
Okay, so we had a second on this?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is lot coverage variation for 206 Walter Drive, case number 15V5. I want to make a motion.
Second that.
All in favor? Alderman Woods?
Yeah. A few more questions, because I wasn't quite sure from the stuff that I received, what existing stuff is coming out? Is the whole existing wood deck, the pond, and the existing patio coming out, and we're just adding the pool and a new patio? That wasn't necessarily clear.
Well, the main discussion at the CDC was in terms of the overall coverage. I know that the applicant committed to, originally their plan was to install a pool and install a patio. The discussion at the CDC was that they were more comfortable with the wood deck rather than the patio, which obviously allows some more drainage. I know the applicants found out about the lot coverage after they moved into the home, had started some work, which was the removal of some of their improvements. They came in to get a permit from the building department, and that's when we discovered the lot coverage issue. And in terms of what's staying and going, I know the applicant probably knows in greater detail more than I what's planned to stay and what's planned to go.
Mayor?
You know,
Oh,
Well, yeah, can we get the, since the,
you have to go to the podium. State your name, please.
Paul Coppola. The pond and the wood deck is coming out, and that's where the pool's going. And then where the concrete patio was, it's gonna be a wood patio, a wood deck now.
but is the concrete coming out?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that was it, that's all I need to know.
Mayor?
Thanks.
yeah, same thing here, Ed. I mean, somebody's putting in a pool, generally the pool's not filled all the way to the top, so if it rains, you're taking on water. But I know in one of these, you talked about changing the 35% to 42%. Well, I can tell you right now, if I'm a builder, I'm gonna start building 42%, then the residents will be coming in for 50 or 52%. I just want to caution before we,
Go ahead.
Well, I think Alderman Messina has an excellent point. If it's something, typically we look at cases if there's, if you have one discrepancy or one variance, it's not a trend. If you have two or three, it looks like it's the beginning of a trend. We try to look at it in terms of, there's a fine line balancing between allowing homeowners to improve their properties and not creating flooding issues. So I know there's a fine line there, and I think maybe, if the council decides that that's the appropriate direction, come back with a report with a number of different options. And I know some things that, we may suggest, I know the council may not be comfortable with, but I think there's a number of different ways to look at it. And I think, my opinion is the 35% across the board in comparison to other communities is very restrictive. I don't know what the magic number is, but I think that's something we should discuss.
Mayor?
the only reason I bring it up is, years ago, previous councils said redo a street, we put in the sidewalks automatic, and, well, as started putting in more sidewalks, we started to get more flooding issues in areas that never happened, so that's why I want to make sure we're, there's a pool, a wood deck, the water's still going through. Those are kind of like no-brainers, but just want to be careful what we're doing.
Exactly.
Alderman Messina?
I totally agree with what the mayor's saying, but I feel like I would rather someone come to me and say, hey, we are looking at a house, versus, I know I have a lot of friends that are saying, I'm not buying in Wooddale because your lot coverage is crazy, and as we grow as a family, I can't do what I want to do. So for me, I'd rather them come and have that opportunity to do it. That's kind of where I stand, and I mean, I hate to say it, but I think it's kind of a shame that these people had to go through the process of paying for the variance. Had we, if we can make it right where it makes sense and we're not vulnerable to more flooding, I think it makes sense. I think this is a lot of people. This is a trend, so it needs to be fixed, and I'm committed to trying to do something to get it fixed, so.
My hand was up first. That was the point I was trying to make. I think we can solve the problem and make everybody happy. Obviously, water's an issue in town. I think if you did the math on this one and we backed out the deck and the pool, because a lot of other communities don't include the pool because it will capture water, and it's not a permanent object, that in fact they would meet the code without the variance. So if we did a couple tweaks that I would recommend, I think that all three people that are here wouldn't need to be here. And we would still keep the integrity of the city and not promote any flooding. I mean, there's a few other things besides the pool and the deck issue that we could address. And I think that that's probably the course we should follow. You know, no reason to do a triple bypass when an antacid will solve the problem. So,
Alderman Roy Wesley,
Thank you.
my favorite alderman.
keep it short, though, I want to get out of here.
Thanks. Ed, the lot next door to that is lower than theirs, correct?
Yes, I believe one of the neighbors or representative of the neighbor was at the public hearing. So there was some concern adjacent to this property, and I know the homeowner, the applicant, did testify that there is, I believe there is a, what would be a swale in that area to direct the water towards the street. I know the applicant testified that they're willing to, whether it's increase or improve the flow of water to direct it to the street, so that it's not a problem for the neighbor.
Yeah, I believe there's a driveway right next to that.
What?
Goes straight to the street.
That's my question here. How much space do you have there to put this swale in?
Well, I think you,
I mean, you got an easement, you got a utility easement there.
You can have a swale in easement.
I understand that. With both, don't both parties have to agree with it, though?
No.
Well, is that gonna answer that, or these two just answer it? I know you wanna get out of here.
Go ahead, Mr. Cage.
just to reiterate, I know the applicant has had some challenges with the property. They weren't aware of the lot coverage issue when they bought the property. And I know that this came up at the CDC meeting. There's an intent to improve the property, and I know they're going, from their testimony, from their actions, I know that they'll be a good neighbor. And really, the key is we don't want to create an adverse drainage problem for our neighbors, so we direct any stormwater to the street where it can be handled by the storm sewer. And I know the applicant would be, as testified, would be willing to do that.
Are they, so that,
Yes.
they're gonna do that?
Yes.
Okay, okay. I just don't want someone else's water to go onto their neighbors.
I understand.
Any other questions?
Just a wagon down.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is the lot coverage variation for 298 Carroll Lane, case number 15V6. I'll make a motion.
Second.
Any questions? Alderman Eugene Wesley.
I have a couple of questions. I mean, I'm not against it, I just want to verify a couple of things. On that property, there is a Buffalo box. I just happened to be at that meeting, and that was discussed. So my question is, are we going to have to move that at their cost, or are we moving it at our cost?
Mr. Cage?
You're absolutely correct. That did come up at the CDC meeting. I think the concern with the CDC was exactly the same as yours. I think it's something that we'd want to review, analyze. If it needs to be relocated, it will be relocated.
Could
Go ahead.
they box it in instead of removing? I mean,
Go ahead.
Before I answer, I'd probably want to meet with, certainly Public Works and an engineer just to get their feedback.
okay.
I think the correct answer is we'll analyze it, and whatever needs to be done will be done so it's correct. I think there's a number of options that are on the table, and we just need to evaluate them.
Okay.
And we will.
Go
I
ahead.
have another thought. I did go out there and there's a couple of cracks. Is that a city sidewalk, I believe? Someone want to answer that? That's a city sidewalk.
Go ahead.
I would
So,
assume so, yes.
My question is, if the gentleman is expanding his driveway, and we have those cracked sidewalks there, is there a way that they could use their contractor to replace that, or are we going to dig it up again after they put this driveway in? Someone's got to answer that question.
Mr. Gage?
Because,
I think probably the best way to move forward, certainly with a couple of these issues, is to get Mr. York, myself, and an engineer together and figure out what the best way to move forward with A, the Buffalo box, and B, with the sidewalk. Because if we do have some cracks there and it needs replacement, you know, if we're going to do it in conjunction with this work, it's probably would make sense, just my opinion.
well, my opinion is, if we can't line our contractor up, and it's probably going to be a legal opinion, is if we have this guy, if his contractor agreed to replace those cubes and then bill us back and then pay them. The point is, I just don't want them put in a new driveway, what we're talking about, and 8 weeks later, I'm digging up their front yard to replace those 2 cubes, and we may do damage to the driveway.
Mr. Gage?
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to save here.
That's an excellent point. I think, you know, some of these things can be coordinated. You're exactly right, Alderman Wesley. I think we don't want the homeowner to make an improvement and then have to go back and make a mess. A good example, and I think, you know, this is probably, you know, picture says 1,000 words in terms of the driveway, and just
Oh, I
just
agree.
bear with me a second. It's, you can see the issue with the driveway. It's a 3-car garage. The applicant has the appropriate width driveway at the garage. It tapers into the sidewalk, and then you can see exactly what the issue is. And really, you know, talking to the applicant, their issue is they can't get that grass to grow in that certain area, and you can see why. And that's why they're looking to widen the driveway.
Oh, why?
Follow up?
Yeah, one more question. So where that Suburban is, and that driveway there, I'm gonna go by the Suburban, that driveway is gonna be straight back, so he's gonna remove part of curbing too, right? City curb?
Yes.
Go
Sorry.
Is that what I'm seeing here?
Yeah, I'm just looking for the plan calls for the, so the plan that the applicant submitted shows a widening, and you can't see it particularly well, where the apron meets the street. So they're going to widen that. It's still going to be within code, so good news there. And then when you get to the sidewalk, it's going to angle over, not square it off, but angle over, so that area where the vehicle, the Suburban, has to pull out to get to the 3rd parking space will be paved, is the intent.
Alderman Woods?
Couple things. Back when I did the calculations, again, just not to beat a dead horse, if we took out the decks, we'd only be at 36% lot coverage. So
Correct.
again, marginally, we'd be having this conversation. With the drive expansion, what's the maximum opening at the sidewalk? Are we 20 feet in this, you know?
I don't want to misstate. I've probably still got Park Ridge's driveway width in my mind, so.
But just for everybody else, so there is a number, the maximum,
Yes.
19, 20, 21
Yeah.
feet, whatever we have here in town.
Yeah. There is a number. It was checked. It does comply.
Right, well, I'm sure it does. And then the sidewalk, when they do the sidewalk, does the sidewalk have to be poured the same thickness as the drive and approach, which typically is a thicker pour, which would then eliminate Eugene's sidewalk
Right.
question?
Typically, yeah, the driveway is a more substantial, you know, in terms of thickness, in terms of base, than a typical sidewalk. But yeah, I think there's a couple of good issues that were brought up this evening in terms of the Buffalo box and the sidewalk, and certainly we'll discuss it with the Public Works Director and the engineer to make sure we're on the same page, this gets resolved in a satisfactory manner.
And then lastly, just
Go ahead.
for information, and for other communities I deal with, Buffalo boxes and approaches, driveways, sidewalks is pretty normal, and they have no issue, so, I mean, we can address it with our engineer and stuff, but I think that we should be okay.
Mayor?
I'm done.
Thank you.
Ed, real quick, so the driveway isn't really a standard opening, it's smaller, is that what you're telling me, at the street?
It's, yeah,
Yeah.
the existing driveway is less than the standards, so even with the widening, it will comply.
And I mean, I don't know why I wasn't around when they put that in, but lot coverage in the parkway counts against the house also?
No.
No.
Oh,
So
sorry.
why did they let them put in a small driveway? That's stupid.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
there's some quirky things out there. I know the homeowner is, trying to improve their property, make some improvements to it. One other thing I should mention on this, no, two other things I should mention on this case is that the maximum lot coverage would be 41%, so slightly less than the 42 that we mentioned with the other cases. And then the one other item, because it is a driveway expansion and a deck expansion at the CDC, they did discuss making a condition best management practice, whether it's a rain garden, to offset some of the additional coverage, because the applicant is looking for, an expansion to the deck, which was consistent with some of the other applications, and an expansion to the driveway. Staff thought it was prudent because we know there's, flooding issues, flooding concerns, is that at permitting, we'll look into options for a BMP on the property.
Mayor?
Yeah, but his deck is also wood, the water will be trickling through,
Correct.
and he's actually even lowering it so he doesn't have any more raccoons and skunks under there, I saw,
Let's hope not.
which is a good thing.
Alderman Messina?
There's no house adjacent to them, right? Actually, there's another house that backs up to them, is that right?
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just trying to remember if it was 268 or 298.
Okay, we have a motion. Mr. Woods, go ahead. Last
Yeah,
question.
Well, I want to address, because the best management practices, what are they going to do? So if they're at 42% and two other people are at 42%, why do we impose BMP on one and not the other? So I just want to be consistent. And so I love the fact that we're saying that, but in fairness, if I was sitting in their seat, I'd be going, how come the other people don't have to do anything?
Go ahead.
That's an excellent point. Really, from a staff standpoint, what we're trying to do is balance an ordinance that is very restrictive. We understand there's a number of flooding issues and concerns in the community. It was felt, even though this one, in terms of coverage, was similar to the other ones, that this could be looked at, and it's your prerogative to eliminate that. It was a recommendation that was discussed at the CDC, but that's exactly why we're here. If you want to be consistent and fair, we could eliminate that, and then I think the prudent way is to, when, during the winter, when time allows, to look at drafting some kind of document report to look at some different options with lot coverage.
Okay, so we have a motion, and we have a second.
Are we keeping the BMP, though? Because the motion would be including the... Do we think that, as a council, do we think that's fair to impose it on one person when the percentages are the same? I mean, we're arguing that our code is inconsistent and doesn't work well, but we're going to pass something that's just as ambiguous later, that somebody else is going to come and argue with me that we did this on this case and did that on that other case.
Go ahead.
I would eliminate BMB
Just eliminate.
until we come back, and I agree with everyone here that we really need to look at that thing and put it together. So, I agree, so don't put the BMB in there. Whoever was the second, there you go.
Okay,
I would agree with that.
so we're taking it out.
So a motion on the floor now is.
Mr. Messina?
Before we move on, Mr. Cage, when you draft that, I know we talk a lot about these rain gardens that we've been doing around the city. Can you include in your report how much that will offset some of the flooding concerns that we might have? How much water that'll take, and maybe that'll help us make a smarter decision?
Might as well include the pools, too.
If you can?
Everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So, again, what is the, I'm sorry, what is the motion on the floor right now?
So the motion is to eliminate the VMD, eliminate that, and BMP.
Best management practice.
Okay,
So
so we
that's
eliminated
yeah.
that, and the motion is to move forward,
Right, with,
grant permission with,
correct,
okay,
okay?
just want
So,
to make sure.
Can we,
all in favor?
hang on, we're voting on eliminating it, or are we voting on the variance?
Taking it out.
We're
the
voting
motion.
to pass the variance
Both.
minus the
Just
best
for
management
this one
practice.
only? Okay. I'm thinking you're changing the whole thing right now.
No,
And you can't do that by,
no, no, no.
okay.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so next, report and recommendation for voluntary annexation progress update. Mr. Director Cage, you want to take the lead on that?
Absolutely. Let me just get my paperwork ready here, and okay, as I'm sure you all remember, this is an item we discussed previously. Just up on the screen there, you can see that some of our previous dates, we had a workshop on March the 11th of this year. We brought it to committee June the 11th for discussion in terms of how the council wanted to proceed. We brought a draft letter back that we were going to send to the residents, to the committee, July 9th of this year, and then that letter ended up going out on July 17th. What we did include in the letter was a deadline to respond from, the residents to respond to the city, and that deadline was August the 28th. And here we are today, September the 10th. As you all remember, when we looked at the initial study, we broke down the areas into letters and numbers. What we're focusing on today are the letters, A through M, and that's the letter we sent out July 17th with some of the details of the proposal to find out if the residents or potential new residents would be interested in annexing into the city. This is a map of really all the properties that responded. I'd say the majority of people called me, and you can see, and I know some of the areas are fairly small, but a wide variety of existing residents, vacant properties that do not have a residence on, in various areas and letters in the community did respond to us. And this is really basically, what we came up in terms of responses. So just briefly, 68 letters were sent out. The reason there's more letters than actual properties. Some people rent their property. Some properties are in trust. So really what we're talking about, 68 letters, but really 51 properties. And as you can see, I did get contact from about 25.5% of those property owners. The majority, 10 out of the 13, were telephone calls. And I did have a couple of people who just mailed in the application for annexation. So obviously those were positive. And I'd say really out of the 13, we only had 2 negative responses. But they weren't out and out negative responses. They were more of a case of the timing's probably not the best for me. I know one individual really, I think his comment was, I'm in my 80s, I don't want the trouble of going through this. So it wasn't necessarily a negative, it was just, it's not the right time for me. So moving forward, these are the areas that the responses in just, that larger map just kind of zoomed in. So that's one of the properties, one of the property owners on Washington. This is 2 properties on Stoneham, actually owned by one person, so that's Area E. That person did contact me, very interested. We did get a number of properties that are interested, and this is Potter and Dunley, and I think Pine right here. So you have 4 different property owners who did contact us, are very interested. I know this gentleman, I believe, lives right here. He's very interested, as are these property owners here. So that's G and H. Did also receive contact from these individuals who are interested, as with this one on Deer Path. This, I believe, is a conservation easement, so it's probably not appropriate to discuss. And then these were the 2 other individuals on Wooddale Road that I did talk to. One was positive, one was not the right time for me.
Mr. Jacob?
Could you go back to the previous?
Yes, absolutely.
The one in orange, is that the large property that they cleared the lot and there was all kinds of talks about doing something over there?
I believe that is the property that...
Right on Route
that-
83?
Yes, correct. And so where that kind of leaves us is...
Hold on, Mr. Cage.
Oh, sorry.
Eugene Wesley?
That one on Washington, is that, fresh my mind, where's that one on Washington? Is that unincorporated area?
Yes, yes, that's
Is
correct.
it the Mohawk Manor? Oh, that little side street, okay. Because there's a Washington and Mohawk Manor too, okay.
So to kind of sum up where we are, we've generated some interest in the concept of voluntary annexation. Staff suggesting, depending on the discussion at the meeting this evening, if it's something the council wants to move forward with, really kind of go with the path of least resistance, focus on these areas we've discussed this evening where people are interested in annexing into the city. Obviously, this is, a fairly lengthy process. Obviously, paperwork needs to be completed, but at this time, staff would look for direction on 2 things. One, to move forward with looking into annexing areas E, G, H, I, and K. And then I think the other key element to this is the actual physical cost of connecting to the infrastructure, the water and the sewer. And really, to everyone I spoke to, the comment was, I'm interested, I saw the letter, I appreciate it from the city. I see there's some benefits to doing it, but really, at the end of the day, what is going to be my cost in terms of connecting? And I think to really find that out, we're going to need to look at cost estimates. And I think some of those individuals would probably, maybe a way forward, and just a suggestion is maybe a community meeting with those property owners. They're able to come, and we'll have some numbers for them, and we can have a discussion.
Mayor?
Thank you.
Ed, real quick, on that Washington, you had one house. Isn't that the whole block? Wasn't that the whole block?
Well, that one is highlighted the property owner who called me, who noted that they were interested. So yes, the Area B is the entire block of Washington.
So only one person responded from that block.
One person, and then one person came in right on the deadline, and they were not interested.
Alderman Woods?
Could you, so you want a motion to, or you want direction,
Direction.
twofold, to move forward on the people that you have contacted and are interested?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to move forward on the people that have been contacted.
I'll second that.
Alderman Roy Wesley?
Well, I'm not gonna be nice to you anymore. Everything that you just mentioned here, there's water and sewer and everything right there for them to hook up, correct?
I
ahead.
Yeah, I don't know that for a fact, but I know it's in the vicinity. But I think the key to people wanting to annex is what's the cost of connecting? I know we discussed in our letter some incentives, some waiving of connection fees, but the physical work of connecting to the water pipe, that's something that we need, because some properties will be, the distance will be less than others, so that's something that we need to get a handle on.
Well,
Go ahead.
that's my question. We can't annex these properties unless we offer water to them. That's a service.
Go ahead.
Back at the original workshop meeting, I'm sure we all remember the bone of contention was Area B. That was really the only area with major costs and major problems with water, sewer. I think all the other ones, it was right in the immediate vicinity. So the only problem was major costs with Area B.
Okay.
All the other ones were.
And again,
And the motion is
Miss-
just to move forward and continue the conversation and get the cost estimates to figure out where we're at and to see how solid the yeses are. So you're not committing to anything.
well, I understand that, but I
Okay.
still want to make sure that there's going to be water there.
Alderman Eugene Wesley.
First of all, I know there ain't no water on Washington Street because I remember a house burnt down over there, so I know for a fact that. So my question is, and I understand your point to move forward, but,
Apparently not.
no, I have a couple concerns.
One at a
Just
time, please.
relax
One at a
over
time.
there.
Jeez.
My question is, before I commit to the big expenditure up there for sewer and water, I mean, we gotta have more than one house, I'm sorry.
Well, we're not doing it.
We're not doing B.
We just said Washington.
No.
Did you not say
The
Washington?
motion is not there.
Go ahead.
The motion has nothing to do with
Yeah, sorry, I should clarify. These are the areas the highlighted areas of the people who responded, so that's all the people I talked to.
So
Now,
Washington ain't in it.
Washington
All right,
isn't
then,
in it.
conversation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just relax. Yeah, you're the one that-
Mayor.
And that was the only question I had is, so basically,
I didn't say you
we're
did.
talking about moving forward, and then we're gonna, what the actual offer is gonna be, we're gonna get some numbers, strategic planning, hopefully coming up soon. I'm sure everybody turned in their sheets, Jeff. And
Go ahead.
You'll schedule the meeting.
As Mr. Cage had noted, and I was preaching this at the very start, and Alderman Woods was on this too, that let's get the ball rolling, because it's a
Right.
long road.
Right.
So there's still a lot to
This is
go.
just to keep
It's the next
moving.
step in the process, yeah.
And the pricing will be coming forward, whatever the offer is gonna be and whatnot.
So we have a motion on the floor and a second. Let's get it moving. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is dumpster enclosure program, code enforcement initiative. Mr. Cage?
You can talk now.
Just bear with me a second here.
Sure.
So this is a dumpster enclosure program, is a code enforcement initiative. I know we discussed this briefly at a prior meeting, and the direction was to come back, bring further information, so we could discuss it in more detail. So what we have is, we went out and got a number of cost estimates for dumpster enclosures. I've been out in the community. I've seen a wide variety of enclosures, some in good repair, some in not so good repair, some non-existent. I certainly don't want to name names, but I know the elected officials know some of the areas where we are heavily deficient in really just, in my mind, some of the basics, which are, if you have a dumpster, it should be screened, especially if you're adjacent to a residential property. And some of the businesses do have them. I'd say, certainly the majority of the new businesses build that into their plan when they come in and develop a new building. Typically what they'll do is, whatever style or material the building is, they'll match the enclosure with it. What we have in front of us is a program where you're really essentially retrofitting an older business, an existing business that doesn't have a dumpster enclosure. So when I called and requested information from various contractors in terms of enclosures, it became very apparent that there's a wide variety in pricing. So just to give you an idea, and these are just approximate numbers, a cedar wood fenced enclosure for one single dumpster is roughly plus or minus $3,000. If you step up to a vinyl enclosure, which is not recommended, because obviously, any replacement of those parts can be awkward and troublesome. The price goes up, approximately, and I'm just using general numbers, $400 or $500 to go to vinyl. The next step up in price would be more of a metal with some of the slats, and that's, you're looking at about $5,000 plus or minus. And the masonry, obviously, even more so than that. So what we did was we contacted a number of different companies just to get some ideas of pricing. And really, what we're looking at is how to balance, how to be business friendly, and this is certainly what staff was thinking, how to be business friendly, and not put something that's very too burdensome on the businesses. So my suggestion was that initially to get a price for a cedar fence, cedar dumpster enclosure at $3,000. I mean, that's essentially one enclosure. If the council was willing to move forward with the proposal, if, for example, a number of businesses moved forward at the same time, and just for the sake of argument, you ordered 5 or 10 at the same time, you would probably get a better price. And that was made clear by the contractors that I spoke to. And then the other thing I know we discussed at a prior meeting was a time frame. So what we're suggesting is a 2-year time frame. And I know we talked about voluntary, mandatory. It's mandatory. So it's a 2-year time frame from whenever, if the proposal is approved. And then the other thing that we did discuss at the prior meeting was if there were to be any incentive. So what we're looking at in a nutshell in terms of the proposal from staff is mandatory compliance in 2 years, recommended cedar enclosure, and obviously that's up for discussion and debate with the council, and then where to start and finish with an incentive if that's something that the council would like to do. Just bearing in mind if we were, the initial thought was if we were going to go with, say, the cedar fence, which is approximately $3,000, a place to start if we wanted to look at an incentive would be maybe somewhere $1,000. That's just an idea. And with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Alderman Roy Wesley.
Ed, for an example, for each business would have to have one, correct? Let me use an example. Shopping center, Georgetown. Okay, each business would have to have an enclosed one, right?
Correct.
So how about if if there's no business there? I mean, there's businesses in Georgetown that's never been filled. So are you saying that Georgetown would have to build one for that business that's not there?
Well,
Go ahead.
I think the key, when I was looking at it was, let's get an idea, let's get a handle on what's out there in terms of enclosures. I think what I was initially thinking was that if you have a dumpster, obviously, clearly you're using it, you need to enclose it. If there's no business there, typically there's no dumpster there. Now, the other option, of course, is, the business, they don't have to use, any of the contractors that we've contacted. They can build the enclosure themselves as long as it meets the same specifications. And worst case scenario, if the business doesn't want to build an enclosure, you can always take the dumpster and move it inside the building. So there's a number of different options.
Also, the shopping center, they're responsible to have an enclosure there? Not the individual business?
Well, yeah, to answer your point, it would be the owners of the property, which would be the shopping center. The one that was mentioned, yeah, there's a number of, there are some enclosures, there's some, damaged enclosures, and there's some areas that just don't have any. And I think one thing I am remiss in not mentioning is that through the facade improvement grant, and I know we discussed this at a prior meeting, that's something if a property owner is looking to work with the city in terms of getting a grant, a dumpster enclosure, we heard it loud and clear that, there's some desire to improve the aesthetics of the community. So that's one of the things I think certainly with some of these applications we're seeing that we could roll that into that program if so desired.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Cage, I'd like to know, in the winter, if we put these in, when that pipe freezes and you can't open the door anymore, because there's ice that gets around the gate there, do they call you? Because they're not going to be able to empty their dumpster because they can't get the gate open?
There's no garbage in the dumpster, you couldn't get the gate open.
Mr. Cage?
Thanks
I
for,
thought
thanks.
it was a trick question.
No, it's not a trick question. It's,
One at a time, please.
well, tell Mr. Art Woods that then.
Go ahead.
Well, one of the key things, it's probably two answers to that part is, obviously, whoever ends up constructing the dumpster, obviously want quality craftsmanship. I think what we tried to do was look at some of the businesses, contractors who are registered in the community, who do a number of improvements in the city. Obviously, they want to keep their good name, and that's why, we contacted the people that we did, because they are registered, A, and B, they have a good name. So I would, I'm hesitant to say anything because it's not my handiwork, probably, thank goodness. But I would assume that they would do a quality job, and that's what the city, and I'm sure the business owner would be expecting.
It's not a matter of a quality job. It's a matter of weather. You're not going to open it when it freezes. You're not opening it, period. Been through it many times. So, is this a start of enclosures? Some businesses have 2 dumpsters,
Correct.
so that would be $6,000.
Well, and
Right.
that's an excellent point. Some businesses have multiple dumpsters. So, a typical, and I'm thinking of some examples, a strip mall, for example, will have a number of different businesses. Generally speaking, most of them will have an individual dumpster per business. Quite frankly, what I saw today is some people have taken that to the next level and gone beyond what would be a regular dumpster and gone for a container. That's taking it to a whole nother level. Obviously, there's some issues with that. So people are storing a number of things outside, and really, you can go to some properties and people do an excellent job with their enclosure. Not only do they have the enclosure that matches the building, they have landscaping, et cetera, and it's obviously well maintained. Some people don't. Really, what we're trying to do is raise that level of expectation. We do have a number of code enforcement issues in the city. Litter and dumpsters is, I'm not going to say the biggest one, but it's certainly, within the top 3 or 4.
So,
Go ahead.
one more question. So we start with the dumpsters. Our next thing is the grease traps for restaurants.
Go ahead.
At this time, that's for the committee to discuss. We're just proposing dumpster enclosures.
Mayor?
Well, speaking of grease traps, they should be included right off the bat. In regards to the snow and ice, I can tell you, if you're a conscientious business, you're gonna clean your dumpster area so the garbage man, otherwise the garbage man's gonna come in and get you, believe me. We had a dumpster area, the fence on the sides was to the ground, where the gates opened, we had about a 3-inch gap, just so the snow on the bottom, so you can, right, well, it's up to you to keep it clean. I mean, we used to have 3, I think, 2-yard containers, or a yard and a half, whatever they were. They were on wheels. Personally, with the wood, I'm a little nervous because I know some of those garbage guys drive, they try and get as close to the fence, they're gonna be cracking those to pieces. I would rather see some type of metal fence with even just a green screening in front. You don't have to put all the slats through it, they're just a simple green mesh, and the mesh you just replace every few years, and it's fairly inexpensive. That's what we used to do. But it would be a metal fence, and we had a black metal fence, like rods. This isn't even painted, so the weather's gonna wear on that. Me personally, if I'm gonna spend, if I was the business, I mean, we did it the right way, we spent a little more money. And if the city's chipping in, I would, personally, the concrete option wasn't even an option, we didn't even think about it back then. We did more decorative fence because we had a resident right across the alley. As far as the incentive, by the time we get this done, winter's gonna be upon us, so if we're gonna put the incentive in, we should at least give them till, I don't know, end of July or end of next August, for those that want the incentive, and then the other ones that wanna do it the following summer, they have 2 years to get the money together to do an enclosure if we're gonna go with the incentive.
Alderman Jacob.
I would agree with some of the things the mayor just said. I mean, again, if that's not stained or painted, eventually it's gonna look like crap again. And we want it to look nice. That's the whole reason we're doing this. What Alderman Wesley had said before, I mean, there's other communities that do it, and I don't see them having problems with the garbage not getting taken out. And the only third thing I'd add is I personally, I think 2 years is too long. I would rather see 18 months. Thank you.
Alderman Messina.
So I agree with Alderman Jacob about the 18-month, not with Alderman Wesley. One question that I read, and correct me if I'm wrong, your cost that you gave us doesn't include coring, doesn't include permits, fees, licenses, right?
Go ahead.
Correct. These are general estimates. I think there's a number of things to to weigh up. I'd say a good majority of the enclosures we have are the metal type, and I don't think there's any magic to the material that's used, but I think the key to any successful enclosure is having those bollards around them, because that eliminates I've seen the ones out there that are metal that are in disrepair because no one's taking care of them. I've seen the wooden ones in the same. I think moving forward, whether it's wood, whether it's metal, whichever direction the council wants to go in, I think the bollards are a key part of that. Just in terms of making it last, making it look better, keeping that original quality. But I think moving forward, depending on the direction, what we will want to do is kind of get a more detailed cost estimate that involves, okay, this is what we have, this is what we're looking to do, give us an actual definitive number so that the council's comfortable with that.
Have we got an estimate how much it will cost the city for incentives citywide?
Right now, just in terms of counting numbers, there's approximately 123 existing dumpsters that are not enclosed. There may be more out there, but just as a reference point, and that's along Irving Park Road, east to west, and that is north and south on Wooddale Road for the kind of commercial area. So this, and just to reiterate one point that I may have missed earlier, this is just for what we're discussing is just a commercial program at this time.
Okay, also, I would like to keep it 2 years. You know, we don't want to shorten it, we want to help out the businesses as much as possible. For 24 months, I think it's fine. Mayor?
Honestly, the 24 months is no big deal, because if they're going to construct it by 2017, October, they better be done. Otherwise, they're going to hit the winter months anyway, so it's going to be 18 months. They're not going to do it in the winter time. The other thing is, with the cost of this, depending on how much we want to put out, and the annexations, just some quick math that I was fooling around with, you're talking $500,000 to $700,000. That's why we really need to have the discussion on how we want to, it sounds like we all want to go forward on both items. We really need to have the money discussion. So, you know, whether it's 10%, or let's say, Mr. Cage said $1,000, maybe it's 500 for wood, 1,000 for metal, or some, you know, some kind of philosophy we'll come up with.
Alderman?
I have two questions.
Go ahead.
Before we move forward with this, I think we need to decide what incentives we're going with before we even put a date on it, right, okay? Number two, you just said commercial. What about industrial? So we aren't enforcing an industrial park either? Just commercial? Because that eliminates all of Potter Street.
Go ahead, Mr. Cage.
We can, you know, the idea was to kind of get an idea of, you know, the amount of dumpsters that are out there, the number that are enclosed, the number that aren't. I mean, this is just a suggestion. If the council wants to, you know, expand it and cover other areas, we can. But, you know, it's fairly time consuming, just going through the numbers, but, you know, I think the key point to take from this is there's probably a lot more dumpsters out there that aren't enclosed than we all think.
Okay, may I do a follow-up?
Go ahead.
So, my question is, Potter Street is considered industrial, right?
It is I-1 light industrial.
All right, so my question is, we sat up here how many months of trying to make that area look better along the tracks? Okay, we talked about trees, we spent months on this project and never panned out with those businesses. They never came on board. I don't know what happened to that project. So I will tell you one thing, if we do not count industrial in there, in that area, because that was the biggest concern about everyone up here on this console taking a train out, ugly that is back there. And they got dumpsters back there. If you do not count the industrial in this project, I am not supporting this project at all. Because if you're going to do it, you do it for commercial and industrial. I mean, why do they get away with it? Industrial pays more taxes to us. They can afford it a lot more than a commercial. That does less businesses in town. Industrial does over the road, whatever. You got to do everyone. I'm sorry, I just can't do it. So,
Mayor?
When we brought this up, anything along the tracks, facing residents, whatever, has to be done. And I know all the way deep in the industrial park, eventually that needs to get done, but we need to start with Irving Park, anything that faces the residents, anything that faces the tracks, the highest profile areas, and then we get into the industrial park. There shouldn't be no exceptions for nobody.
Alderman Jacob?
I think the way it's worded here, highly visible, Potter's highly visible to the homes over there, so I don't see why it wouldn't be considered.
well, he said commercial, not industrial.
But it also says highly visible businesses.
Well,
Alderman Messina?
to Alderman Eugene Wesley's point, though, that's a lot of gray area. If I come to you and say, you do it, you're highly visible, but you're not, we're asking for trouble as a city, so we need to be clear on that. Right. That wasn't my point, there's a million people here. So I think that needs to be very loud and clear with what you say, because we can't be biased. But what's our plan as far as maintenance and code enforcement once these are up? Any plan yet, or are we still planning stages, way too early?
Go ahead, Mr. Cage.
Well, I think, you know, a couple of comments. One answer, we haven't even, in terms of maintenance, I mean, that's something, you know, obviously, I think the bollards are really essential to maintaining whatever structure we have out there, because that's going to protect it. You know, if someone hits that with any kind of a vehicle, they're going to feel it. It's going to protect the structure. That's not something we've discussed as of yet, but that's an important issue. What we don't want to do is implement a program, and then X number of years, we still have a similar kind of problem. And then the other point is, or the other clarification, some of the other properties I'd probably recommend, if we're going to look at certain properties, we come up with a list of, you know, whether it's, you know, I-1, I-2, you know, use some of the zoning districts. That's probably a safe way to go about it. The problem with some of these properties is, and I can testify to that, if you actually want to go take a look at them and where their dumpsters are, to get around, you know, to the back of some of these properties is a bit of a challenge. So I'm going to tell you right now, the 123 that I found, I'm sure there's a lot more than that.
Okay, I guess we're going to table this at this point then, until we get more. I need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
One more? Go ahead.
All right, I was just thinking here regarding what the mayor mentioned and the amount of dumpsters that are involved. You know, it's almost a little contradictory to make something mandatory and then turn around and reward them for doing something that's mandatory in the form of a cash incentive. Alderman Messina brought up a great point as far as the upfront cost to put this dumpster in place or put the surrounding in place. What we may want to consider is, as far as a partnership with the businesses in the city, is waiving those fees in lieu of cash incentive. And now it would form a partnership and it would be a lot less money. As you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, you know, when you start adding this up, we're at $500,000 that may be used elsewhere for a better reason. You know, it's like if you tell your kids it's mandatory to go to school, and now you buy them a car. Public transportation works just as well. So that's my only comment, is food for thought as far as the financials go with this program. What would be the cost, Mr. Cage, if someone wanted to come in and put this thing together as a business?
Go ahead.
Well, I think that's what we're struggling to get our arms around is, firstly, I think it's, you know, what type of enclosure, what type of material does the council want to go with, or do we leave it open?
I was referring to, bless you, fees and permits, that cost factor.
Sorry, yeah, I apologize. What staff's recommending is that a permit would be required for an enclosure, so we keep a record of the paperwork, but we would not charge a permit fee.
Okay. Mayor, go ahead.
If we're gonna make a motion to table, just table it to strategic planning, because we need to have the discussion. Otherwise, what are we gonna do? Table it indefinitely?
No.
The numbers, the areas, should be every area, anybody who's got a garbage. Right. To, table to what? For permanent, forever?
Is he going to have all that information before the plan, before we discuss it, what was raised tonight?
Go ahead, Mayor.
He can only answer our questions if we give him some direction. So what is our direction? And it's definitely not gonna be tonight, so it may be strategic planning or something, the manager may have an idea.
Mr. Murmas, go ahead.
I think we got a lot of good discussion tonight. We kind of know where a lot of the council stands. There were a lot of good ideas, a lot of things discussed. I'm sure Ed took good notes. I've got good notes. I don't think there's a date to table two. We can just table it for now, and then we'll bring it back up at committee in the near future once we get together some of these numbers. Ed made a good point. You know, maybe it's not all industrial, I-1, I-2. We can throw some maps together, get it on the screen, proceed forward, tabling, you know, not indefinitely.
No,
but
we're
just-
not gonna do
We've got good feedback enough
Yeah.
to come back with more information to keep the ball rolling.
Okay, so we're not gonna table it indefinitely. We're gonna bring it back.
What, there's a table,
You made the motion?
yeah, but no one's said anything because
Anybody second?
Not yet, because Tony wanted to talk, which he has a right to.
I second it, to bring it
Okay,
back,
now,
to bring it back at a future date.
okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next is items to consider for future meetings. Well water policy, that's September 24th. And then the clock tower garden coming up this fall. An additional ornamental signage bid, date to be announced. Any other items to consider? Go ahead, Alderman Jacob.
Are we gonna add that, about what we were talking about, the lot coverage? Okay.
Any other? Go ahead, Eugene Wesley.
First of all, to add that to the next agenda, the lot coverage? Oh, because that's going to take a long time to take care of. Okay, okay.
Any other items?
I did speak with HR Green, who's working with staff on the grant for the clock tower. We will have the PPI form and the grant information together for September 24th. So I know it says fall, but I think all the paperwork is pretty much done now, so we can have a discussion on the 24th.
Okay. And now I need a motion to adjourn. All
Second.
in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
We want to keep talking.
We adjourned.
Change the hot seat.
No, we want to bring it back.
I'd like to call the Public Works Committee to order. Let the minute taker show that the same people, same members are present.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the
So
minutes
moved.
of the regular meeting, August 13.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Next is tree planting contract for 2015 Fall Tree Planting Program with St. Albert's Nursery and Landscaping, Inc., in the amount not to exceed $31,270. That is my motion.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes.
I didn't even have a chance to answer my question, but that's all right.
There are no questions. They were all used up in the last committee.
Then I oppose. We'll bring it back.
Next, agreement for professional services with Robinson Engineering for construction management on Hemlock Sidewalk Project in an amount not to exceed $23,500. That is my motion.
Second.
Questions?
Thank you. When's that project starting?
Mr. York?
The project will start right around the 1st of October.
And
It should take about 2 to 3 weeks to get completed. Hopefully it'll be done before the...
2 or 3 weeks?
Yeah, or we'll say a month. I think it's a 20, I'd have to look to see what the contracted date amount is, but it's a rather
Okay.
short project. It's only on the one side of the street.
Okay.
Mr. Murmas?
For those of you who remember, Edgewood sidewalk was originally part of
Yep.
this Hemlock sidewalk. We did not forget about it. Mr. York has actually been going out there, knocking on residents' doors. We're down to 2 non-respondents, so we're making progress, slow but sure. We will eventually have something out there. I'm thinking in the spring we'll be able to do something out there, at least a sidewalk on one side of the street for sure, if not both. So we are making progress. We didn't forget.
There are grants available on grant finders. Oh, there was one that came out,
We signed up.
so. I'm sorry.
Any more questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, approval of the Ward 3 Mill Road Stormwater Main Improvement Project to Baxter and Woodman, Inc., in amount not to exceed $177,675. That is my motion.
Second.
Questions? Let's take a roll call vote on this one. Oh, Alderman Eugene Wesley.
My question is that's counting, it says the storm and water main improvement, that's counting regrinding and resurfacing. And if I'm mistaken, that's partly Itasca, which we received a letter that they are in board with that. So are we paying the bill, we paying the engineer direction? Are we paying the bill of the contractors and then billing them, or how is that working? Or are they giving us our portion now? I mean, I'm just asking that question.
Mr. York?
I'm not exactly sure the logistics on the back end of how this is ultimately going to get paid out. I need to work with Mr. Wilson on that. We're not going to know a final price until we actually go to bid on the actual project. This is for the design portion of it. They are on board to pay 6%. Once we get that final bid price in, we will then work the IGA up. That will calculate all their cost and get that to them and work out payment. I'm sure it's going to be us paying them and then us paying the contractor and then getting reimbursed from Itasca
So-
for the 6%.
I got one follow-up question.
Well, Mr. Murmas, do you want to
That
chime
was
in?
on a separate topic after.
Okay.
Same topic, different.
My other follow-up question is, the question was raised here at one time. If we sign a contract to go forward with a contractor and this bid is outrageous, which we know bids are coming in higher than expected right now. 2.5 on a road project, another project came in over bid. My question is, before we decide, before you bring that contract to us for the proposal, for the final vote, after it goes out for bid, I would hope that we have an answer, yes or no, with Itasca. They're going to accept those bids or not, because I don't think it's fair for us to get stuck with the whole entire bid and then pay it, and then we go Itasca and say, hey, by the way, you owe us this. And then they say, no way, we didn't agree to the contract, or we didn't bid for that price. So if we're doing a joint effort here on a project, which I understand they got a small portion, no doubt about that. But again, we've been this route before with another town, that we got shafted on a road project. We ended up paying a whole project because that was before your time. I don't want to see that picture again. So when the bids come in, I would assume that before it comes to our dais here, that you got to sign agreement. Itasca's on board, or they not? Thank you.
Mr. York?
Yeah, I mean, we can work on that with them, depending on timing and as such. If you want us to delay until we get the actual signed IGA from them, if that's a direction, then that's what we'll do. And if our project gets delayed by 3-6 months because they're lackadaisical about signing an IGA for 6% of the project, then we'll do that. We can have discussions once we get closer to that point. Once those bids come in, and once we kind of feel out, we can run it up the flagpole over there pretty quickly and see if it's gonna fly or not. But if they hem and haw and delay the project by 2, 3, 4 months, and all of a sudden it's August before we can start, or September before we can start putting shovels in the ground, then we turn into having late asphalt and the other issues like that. So we'll do the best we can.
I don't care if you get a verbal. I just don't want to pay for another part of the street that we ended up paying for, that some village is backed out on. And we were just discussing that we need to look at our expenditure on these projects, the dumpsters enclosure and the other thing. If we keep giving away 6% to other towns because the road is joint with them, 6% is going to add up eventually. All I'm saying is get a verbal with them before we commit to a contract. That's all.
Understood.
Thank you.
Got it.
Okay. Mr. Murmas?
Yeah, I just want to, for the residents, taxpayers watching at home, just want to reiterate that the council, the city was able to get $800,000 for this project, which is a massive grant amount for a road project for us, one of the biggest ever. So 800 grand in grant money, so I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that.
Roll call vote?
Alderman Sorrentino?
Yes.
Alderman Messina?
Yes.
Alderman Catalano?
Yes.
Alderman Jacob?
Yes.
Alderman Woods?
No.
Alderman Roy Wesley? Alderman Eugene Wesley?
What's the, abstain?
Passes. That passes. Next, approval of SCADA system improvements for the water system to BWCSI in an amount not to exceed $26,460. That is my motion. Do I have a second? Alderman Eugene Wesley.
What SCADA system is it?
All right, this is for the, sorry.
Mr. York.
This is for the water side of the SCADA system. So we have two separate SCADA systems, one for wastewater and one for potable water, drinking water on the water side. So the water side collects all kinds of flow data from DWC, thank you, DWC, to, and brings it in, how much goes in, how much goes out, how much goes through each of one of our pumping stations, how much goes through each one of our pumps, that kind of information. So what these, what this is trying to do is to take that information and be able to put it in the computer so that we can get it out for reports. Because right now what we have to do is go around to each of the stations, write down the numbers, take the numbers, put it into a different spreadsheet, take it off the computer over here, put it in the computer over there, and to this side, so that we make sure that our reports each month are done properly. So what this is going to do is basically automate a lot of the system for us.
But it's not when we did the treatment plant that we put both of them in operation. So now why am I committing with $26,000 more? Is that to install it? I mean, I thought we did, when we did the treatment plant, we looked at that in the contract that they both go at the same time. Now, where's this $26,000?
Mr. York.
This isn't the hardware. That's the hardware. What you guys approved before is the hardware. How to get it onto the computer, okay? So now, in order to get it from the computer to the reporting form, to be able to modify things within the computer system, you have to have other programming. So basically now we can see it. Now we want to manipulate it, to be able to use the information to do what the SCADA system is supposed to do. So you got it on TV, now you're playing with it. Now you can move things around, you can actually take the data, dump it into different reports, be able to manipulate the data so we can get good reports on flow data, how much is going through each one of the pumps. Is pump number 9 and pump number 10, are they running at the same rates? No, they're not. And how can we adjust those to, after looking at data for 6 months from each of those pumps? So the information that we have is good information now. Now we want to be able to do something with that information, and that's what this money is for.
Who's going to download this data? What division is going to download this data and use it?
Well, this is for water side, so it's the utilities division. So
Who's
it's,
going to take the time to download?
well, each month we have to do our monthly reports for the IEPA. So the information that we use, that the SCADA collects for us each month, is then taken and written into these reports so we can go out to the IEPA. What the big part of this is to take all that information and through programming and all kinds of fun stuff that I don't know how to do, will ultimately make a report that will say, this is what it looks like, and all the holes are filled in properly. So that we don't have to go, all right, well, here's this paper over here, and I've got to take line 7, column 3, and that goes over here.
Okay.
One more question, I'm done. The question to me is, we go ahead and spend $26,460. Is this going to be to take care of the whole system, or are you going to come back to me and say, we need a whole new computer system in that building? You know what? Again, what I preach about is don't piecemeal this together. If you're telling me next month you're going to come back and say we need more computers to download the system or whatever, you better bring it to me now instead of piecemealing something else.
Yeah.
Mr. York.
Is the SCADA system going to be complete with this? The answer is probably no. And it's because as things change and as it's dynamic, it's not it's not a solid it's a flowing system. It's just like GIS is. It's just like a lot of the things that are computer-based. It's, you have a tree here today, and you take the tree out, you got to put the new tree in, you got to have that redone. It doesn't mean that the system is done. So what we're going to do is to make the SCADA improvements today. I won't come back to you next committee and ask you for another water system SCADA improvement. Teaser, there will be another SCADA system improvement, but it won't be for the water system. But I won't come back to you and ask you for that. I'm not piecemealing it together like this. What we find things that we need that the SCADA system can do for us, and working with the guys that I have on staff, working with the guys from BWSCI, that they're helping us look at different ways that we can manipulate the data to perform the tasks that we have. This is going to be a cost-saving measure for us. It's going to allow us to not have typographical errors, because I type in 2.4 million and it was supposed to be 4.2 million. So all that data will be able to go over seamlessly and be able to go to the reporting mechanism.
All the scan data,
Okay.
all the stuff you're asking for, we should be able to get more work done.
I'm hoping for it.
Alderman Jacob.
I have a couple things. First of all, I kind of have to agree with Alderman E. Wesley here. So we approved a half a system, but now, so originally we approved a system that you were going to handwrite stuff, and now we want to put it on a computer. Why would we have not have done the whole thing the right way from the beginning? And
Mr. York.
Yeah, I'm not at liberty to answer that question because I wasn't here for the design of the wastewater or the water SCADA system. So I apologize for that. But this is what we see that we need. We need this. I mean, this has been on people's radar for 6-8 months, and now we're finally getting enough of it together. So we didn't piecemeal it. If you notice in here, there's two different requests that we're making. It's for the flow meter integration at the Wooddale Road Pumping Station, and also the water system reporting improvements. So we did bring some things together and allow them to come together as one bigger package and bring it forward to you. So, I mean, once again, if you don't feel that we need to do this, then that's the prerogative of the board. But as a public works director, and the information that our guys are using this stuff on a daily basis, I feel that it's prudent to move forward.
Alderman Messina.
I'm excited. It's my world. All right, so if I hear you correctly, we've done the hardware. This is the software piece that we're looking at. I think just so you guys understand, it's about automation, right? So we're automating everything, so that frees up staff time, but also it's an early indicator. If something's going to go wrong, like the flow rates are off, we'll be able to detect that earlier. Am I correct? Okay.
Instantaneously.
Right, which could be huge cost savings for the city. Secondly, this sounds like it's something that we're purchasing via software download or licenses. Is this something we can get in the cloud so that as versions come out, you don't have to constantly come back to us and say, hey, version 22.25 has come out. Is there a way to maybe get something where it's in the cloud, it updates, and we're paying maybe, I think some of these systems, I'm not saying SCADA systems, but a lot of these systems in the cloud are monthly, which might help us offset some costs.
Yeah, and I don't know the answer to that. I can look at that for you and get that information to you. And work with I think it's more of a programming issue.
Okay.
And not, since we already have the SCADA system and we already have the backbone of it, it's more of, let's call it an app. It's more like
And add on functionality.
Yeah, functionality
Okay.
to make it do what we want it to do.
Okay. Good with it.
Alderman Catalano.
Was this in the budget? This amount? It was?
Yes.
Alderman Jacob.
Again, I agree with Alderman Messina that, we do need the technology. But the point was, you said you weren't here, but our engineer was here. We pay an engineer to look at this stuff why did the engineer not tell us that we're gonna need this at some point? And at that point, we could have budgeted more for this, or whatever else we needed.
I'm gonna take privilege and interject.
I got a good one.
Okay, Mr. Murmas, clear it up for us.
I could be crazy. My wife tells me I'm crazy all the time, but I'm pretty sure if we go back and we look in our CIPs for the past 3-4 years, it was a multi-year project, and this was anticipated by the engineers, and it was not piecemealed. It was purposely done, multi-phased, because different things were coming online with the treatment plant, different changes in the water system. So I'm pretty sure within the CIP, this was already plugged out, which is why it's budgeted for this year. So it wasn't like Matt stumbled into the office yesterday and was meeting with BEW, CSI. He's like, oh, yeah, we need to get this. And I think it was a multi-year plan. I could be crazy.
Mr. Eugene Wesley.
What's the other SCADA system that you're bringing forward in the next month?
Mr. York.
The wastewater side, the SCADA system that has been in place at the treatment plant, there's another component to that, and that is the lift stations.
Is what?
The lift stations.
Okay, so
So we want to be able to get the information that we have at the lift stations and be able to read them from the office, from one central location, instead of having to go on a daily basis out to do rounds or whatever, or have someone be able to monitor it from the SCADA computer. That's a very pivotal point brought up in the lift station study that we had done over the winter, and part that was budgeted for in the CIP, that we need to do this, to be able to capture that data. There's no reason to have flow information if you can't use it for anything. And that's kind of what we're trying to do. We got the information out there. Right now, in the wastewater side, it's on a ticker, or it's on a wheel. Grab that stuff, make it the digital image, make it a number so we can say, this pump is supposed to run at 300 gallons a minute, and it's running at $1.50. What is wrong out there? There's a rag stuck in it. There's not enough energy to it. Why? So we can go out and do our maintenance on these pieces of equipment. I mean, that's off topic because that's not what we're talking about here.
But here's the thing. Why don't we just bring them both together? Same time. If you do a proposal for both of them and you may use the same vendor, you're trying to tell me he won't sharpen his pencil and say, hey, you're taking both things at once, we'll cut the deal a little lower? I mean, the way I look at it, if you do more, you get a less price. And if it's in a budget for the other part, why don't you do them both at the same time? That's what I'm trying to say.
Mr. York.
The reason they were supposed to both to come at tonight, and when I was going over the final proposals from Baxter and Woodman, CSI, he made an error in it. That's the truth.
They made another one?
Well, in his proposal, he didn't put a part of it that I wanted into the proposal. And I said, is this in the proposal? He's like, no. And I said, well, we'll go back and do it again because I'm not taking it like this. So, I mean, they're two separate ones. They're two totally separate systems. Just because they have SCADA with them doesn't mean that they're interlocked to each other. They're two totally separate systems. They're two totally separate programs. So, I mean, if you want to table it, that's fine as well. But that's why I didn't bring both of them together at the same time.
Not this time, man. I'm interjecting here. The piecemeal part, as we built and put a 21st century treatment plant together, now we have the ability to actually link some of the things that we had before. So as we build out our infrastructure, enhance those things, we create more opportunities for ourselves. There was no way to plan all those up front as we do it. So some of those things, i.e. the lift stations and that, are going to come piecemeal. There's no way we were going to figure out a treatment plant, what happens to the south treatment plant, what happens to every lift station, what happens to every water main pump, whatever happens to all the towers, you'd never be able to have a bid because you'd continually go on and on and on. Somewhere, you gotta start somewhere and start building the system. That's what Randy was saying before. This is just another part. This is the part that creates more functionality. They're really, while they're similar, they're not specifically linked. I think we need to move forward. Do we have a motion on this thing yet? Yeah, we do. We have a motion in a second.
Second.
No, there is a motion.
Sorry.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
You still want to talk?
No, well, just real quick.
Mr. Murmas?
When Matt brings the other SCADA item, if you guys are interested, we can have the guys from BWCSI come out. It's very interesting stuff. If you
All I
want
would
to come out,
ask
I mean,
is, it really is a no-brainer. If you talk about the cost savings, what does it mean for the residents? Talk cost savings, automation. We get your guys on the street more, doing more mission-critical things than driving around to lift stations. And that's mission-critical stuff, and we could have them doing better things. The technology's there, and I think it makes sense. So
Did you want him to come out next time, or no? No? Okay. They're fun guys.
I bet they are.
if you come to us again, can you look into the cloud option? I do want to see if there's a cloud option and maybe a monthly. I don't know if it exists for this kind of system, but that'd be,
Yeah, I can look at the backbone and see what it is and what other options there are out there. So I may have it for you at the same time as the wastewater SCADA one. I may not.
no
So,
rush. Okay,
But I will look into how the SCADA system works.
thanks.
Are we paying twice for the engineer on this project?
No, we're moving on. Next, approval of final payment request to Schroeder Asphalt Surfaces, Inc. for the Royal Oaks project in an amount not to exceed $35,584.93. That is my motion. Do I have a second? Questions?
Oh, you're talking.
Mr. Roy Wesley?
No, I don't want one.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Items to be considered. Alderman Roy Wesley?
Yes. Handicap parking, is that your department or is that Ed's department?
Mr. Murmas?
That's probably what you're referring to as planning, zoning, building.
Okay.
Other questions?
Yeah, since I couldn't get it out before,
All right.
so
Fire
I'm
away.
asking now. Since there was a mistake done on this cicada thing or whatever, this,
SCADA.
SCADA,
Yes.
are we paying twice
No, we're not paying,
for Baxman Woodman?
Mr. York?
I don't pay people to give me proposals.
Well,
So,
I don't know
no,
how
I'm not-
far they
I'm-
go.
Yeah, I'm not paying them to do proposals for me. If they want the work, they're gonna give me a proposal. If the proposal's not right, they're gonna give me another proposal until they get it right. So I'm not double paying Baxter and Woodman for the work of their proposals.
Are they the only ones that you could get proposals from?
Well, I mean, they've done the SCADA package from the beginning,
Okay, that's all.
so.
Items considered at future meetings. Vehicle purchases, September 24th. Sidewalk and tree trimming bid, September 24th. Snow removal, IGA, September 24th. Ward 2, Phase 3 engineering, October 8th. Does anybody have anything? Alderman Eugene Wesley.
The item that I want to add on there, and Jeff, if you want to add it on now, I'd like to talk to Edison about, eventually we're going to have to update the other treatment plant. And there was conversation last year with Edison to see if we could take some of our flow from that other station. I'd like to direct the staff to go ahead and meet with Edison to see if they can board to do that, which will be a savings for us, and we don't have to redo that whole plant up there. So I would like you guys to give staff direction to have that open conversation with Edison.
But we would have to get lines from our plant to their plant.
Right,
Right, so it's
Right.
not without cost.
right, but it will be a lot cheaper
How you gonna do that?
cost. I think because we would have to, I think it's gonna be a cheaper price.
You got a golf course going through there.
Mayor, please.
It ain't going through the,
Also a strategic plan item coming up, strategic planning.
Okay, next, I make a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Residents are raising their hands, it's time to.
You don't want you to disperse.